Story 1. Almost fell asleep in a running car after closing the garage door behind me. My body had that little jerk that sometimes happens right before you fall asleep, and I woke up realizing what was happening. I didn't think about how easily I could have died until years later. Story 2. When I was 19 years old, 41 now, I was driving around my neighborhood after a storm. The area was completely flooded. Some friends and I decided to help a drunk man push his car out of the water. I was on the side closest to the curb, pushing and using my right foot to feel the curb to avoid accidentally turning the car into it. Little did I know, those metal grates in front of storm drains opened to allow more water in. I stepped inside one and fell to my collarbone level. The water was a little above my waist, and caught myself with my arms. I was down there for about 15 to 20 seconds before my friend reached down and pulled me up. If I hadn't caught myself and if my friend hadn't pulled me up, I would have definitely drowned. I don't go in flood water anymore. Story 3. Driving while tired is dangerous. Pull over and rest for 15 to 30 minutes if you ever find yourself tired while driving. Your pride is not worth your life. Story 4. When I was about 9, I was very interested in world wrestling entertainment and loved when The Undertaker would walk out with smoke everywhere. I decided to fill my room with smoke using nearly an entire can of Axe body spray. By the time I finished, my door handle was covered in the spray, and I could not open it. My mother heard me knocking on the door and was baffled by what I was doing. I think that would have been a classic case of natural selection. Story 5. I was in Mazatlan in college in the late 1980s, and I couldn't get into my hotel room because my roommates had the key. I was drunk and tired and desperately wanted to go to bed. So, I knocked on the door of the room next to mine and climbed from that room's 7-story balcony to mine. The balconies had archways made of Spanish tile pipes, so you could put your hands and feet in them. It was not as easy as just going around a divider. I probably had to go 6 or 8 feet. Stupid. I still get shivers thinking about it. Story 6. Drunk, on drugs, and at my rock bottom, I pulled into my garage, closed the door, and went to sleep. My stepdad found me, and if he had come any later, I would have died. I am now in Alcoholics Anonymous. If this is something anyone here struggles with, you are not alone. Story 7. When I was 9, I decided to blow dry my hair while taking a bath. My mom walked in, calmly asked for the hair dryer, then slapped me, screaming hysterically that I could have been killed. Story 8. When I was 12, I was enjoying the beach in California. I was playing in the waves, looking out towards the ocean, and kept going a little farther and a little farther. Eventually, I couldn't touch the bottom anymore, but I was a good swimmer, so I wasn't worried about it. After what seemed like only a little time had passed, I looked back to shore and realized I was very far out. I started swimming back, but no matter how hard I swam, I was not getting any closer. I soon started tiring and finally began yelling for help. Fortunately, a Romanian college student staying with us, who was also on vacation with my family, heard me, swam out, and pushed me back to shore. I then learned that I had been stuck in a rip current. Rip currents are no joke, and anyone swimming in the ocean should know about them. Story 9. I looked down the barrel of my stepfather's gun, thinking about pulling the trigger to hear it click after removing the magazine. Then I turned the gun away and chambered it just to see inside, and a bullet popped out that was already in there. Of course, he had told me never to open the ammunition case where he kept the gun. I realized how close I came to dying. I put the gun back and had the most introspective moment of my life thus far. I think I was a freshman in high school at the time. Story 10. I was on a train in Vietnam headed towards Hanoi. We were just starting to get going, so I stuck my head out of the window to look around. A train attendant grabbed me and pulled me in. As I turned to look back at the window where I had my head sticking out, a light pole went by that would have completely decapitated me. Story 11. I hit my head really badly at home while alone. I woke up to the sound of blood dripping and noticed I was lying in a puddle of blood. I proceeded to push myself up, covering my hands in blood. That made me unable to call emergency services, as my phone did not like getting completely bloody. I walked downstairs, past a mirror, and saw a wound about 4 to 5 inches long on my skull. I walked over to my only neighbor, and they called an ambulance for me just before I passed out. The doctor said I almost bled out. After I got stitches, the wound was cauterized. Difficult experience. Story 12. I was climbing to the very top of my ship's mast to replace a signal light, about 150 feet in the air with a 120-foot drop to the main deck. I had to half stand on top of it to sit and straddle the arm to the light that came off the mast. The ship was rolling, so the whole mast was swaying high above the deck. I stood, swung my leg over, and sat after catching myself from swaying a little, only to look down and see that my fall arrestor was clicked onto my harness and not the mast. Story 13. I thought about cutting my hair in the shower to save time using a set of hair clippers. They would not reach. It was not until I stepped into the shower with the water running that I realized how unwise that was. Story 14. In my troubled days, I was using drugs. I happened to have about 10 2-milligram Xanax pills in my pocket. I was parked about 7 houses down from my home, which I rented with a roommate. I didn't want to share the expensive cannabis I had, so I was smoking and listening to music just down the block. A police officer pulled up and turned on his lights. I swallowed all my pills. He ended up letting me go and made sure I actually lived where I said I did. Once I was home, I tried to throw up, but nothing came up. I don't know who took me to the emergency room. My roommate wasn't home that night, but I woke up in the hospital. I accidentally almost killed myself trying to avoid a drug charge. I'll be 15 years clean off hard substances this Labor Day. Story 15. Dived into the shallow end of the pool at 18 years old. The lifeguard screamed. I skimmed the bottom and realized just how close I came to cracking my head open and dying. Story 16. Crossed a railroad crossing and did not realize it was one of those rural ones with no gates. Saw the train blast by in my rearview mirror, and then it hit me what I had done and how close of a call it was. Story 17. Wiring a piece of brand new industrial equipment. The assembler at the factory had swapped the ground wire for one leg of the three-phase power. I received one leg of 480-volt three-phase electricity from hand to hand, across my chest, for just under a second. Another crew member watched me for an hour to see if I would suddenly have heart failure and die. I did not. I am not posting from the afterlife. The importer who sold the equipment had a very long, angry call with the manufacturing representative. If you have never done this, it is very unpleasant. Story 18. Not myself but my younger brother. This was back when we were in our 20s. He was using the handle of a chef's knife to pound something on the counter, though I don't remember what. He was tapping the handle repeatedly while looking down at his work. For a split second, the point of the chef's knife came within a millimeter of his eye. He stopped, and we looked at each other for a long moment. My brother almost stabbed himself through the skull. What? Story 19. I guess this could be considered non-accidental, but at 18 years old, I was over 600 pounds. I know that sounds insane and that I am lying, but I swear on my family's life I am not. I always struggled with binge eating and being the overweight person. I rapidly gained weight. In just 4 months, I gained 100 pounds and went from 500 to over 600 pounds. I felt terrible constantly. The 609 on the scale hit me extremely hard, and I was scared of my parents burying me. In July of last year, I started to lose weight. As of my last weigh-in, I am down 137.4 pounds in total. I am now 19 years old, of course. I currently weigh in the 470s. I know that is still a large amount of weight for a person to be, but the difference already is remarkable. My goal weight is 270 pounds body weight. Thank you all for the kind words and encouragement. I truly appreciate the support and inspiration. Story 20. When I was a kid riding in the back seat of a car, I was dragging a rope out the window tied around my wrist. It occurred to me that this might not be smart, so I took it off my wrist. A moment later, the rope went under the rear tire and was violently ripped out of my hand. I get chills when I think of what might have happened. I must have been about 10 years old. Story 21. I used to drive like a maniac in a car that was definitely not suited for my driving style. I had a few close calls. One was hill hopping, much like the scene from Ferris Bueller. I hit the top of the hill going 70 miles per hour, got some serious air, and landed next to a car going the other direction, close enough to pick the driver's nose for him. I probably scared him more than myself. I used up enough luck in my youth, so I don't do dumb stuff like that anymore. Story 22. Getting emotionally drunk 4 Thanksgivings ago and crashing into a tree at 70 miles an hour. I came out with nothing but 2 black eyes and a driving under the influence charge. Luckily, it was a tree and not a family. I will never drink and drive again. Story 23. I was going to jump over some bushes when I was 7. I got a great running start, and when I got close, my dad yelled my name and I stopped. Cliff. Big Cliff. Story 24. Back in 2018, I relapsed on both alcohol and heroin. Very predictably, I overdosed and hit my head very hard falling from a standing position. By some miracle, I never stopped breathing, but either due to the cocktail of chemicals or the fall itself, I was flat on my back in an extended stay for 18 hours without moving. Apparently, 18 hours in one position was enough to cause muscle death, which caused rhabdomyolysis. It was the rhabdomyolysis which almost killed me. I was in a coma for about a week, during which my body was struggling with what was going to fail next. My parents, who live on opposite sides of the country, both flew down to Florida to say their goodbyes. The doctors kept me alive long enough for my body to miraculously recover. I don't remember when I woke up. I wasn't forming memories immediately after waking up from the coma. But a few hours later, I remember when I came to, as in I could understand what was going on and form memories. The first thing I remember is opening my eyes and seeing both my parents sitting in chairs near the foot of the hospital bed. I didn't remember exactly what happened, but understood it must have been very serious if they were both there, and knew myself well enough to know it was almost certainly my fault. I had overdosed on about December 17th. I woke up on Christmas Eve. I was in the hospital for another 2 weeks or so with the worst flank pain I have ever felt. After I got out, the only residual effect was that I had an extremely hard time remembering names of people I had met in the preceding months. I could remember everything else about them, just not their names. The icing on the cake was that I was uninsured, which caused its own set of problems. I would like to say that was finally the moment I turned my life around, but it was not. I relapsed again at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. I do not really know why that run was the last time. The consequences of that relapse were almost non-existent, both personally and for my loved ones, as this relapse was short, so my family was blissfully unaware. They were not exposed to any emotional distress this time before I got clean. I have been clean ever since and have not had any close calls or desires to relapse. It just suddenly felt like it was not worth the hassle anymore. Story 25. Sucking chocolate icing off a butter knife. Opening a cupboard door and slamming it directly into the knife, which scratched the roof of my mouth. I had to sit on the kitchen floor for a while and reevaluate how careless I am. Story 26. Falling asleep at the wheel of a car late at night on a tight road surrounded by trees. Luckily, the bouncing of the car on the curb woke me up. I was fortunate to be in a straight line with no oncoming traffic. Story 27. Once, when I was in my garage, I had to splice a plastic coupling that was stuck to a metal insert. I tried doing it with a knife. After struggling for a while, I found that pushing the coupling against my chest and the knife against it allowed me to apply better force. As I pressed down hard, I realized that if I managed to split the coupling, the knife could drive right into my chest. So I removed it and used a hammer on the floor instead. Afterwards, I realized how careless I had been, as I really do not have much to live for anyway, and this could have been an easy accidental way out. Story 28. Jumping into the deep end in an Olympic-sized pool when no one was watching. I did not know how to swim then. The only thing that saved me was that I had jumped very close to the ladder. If not, I would have been dead. Story 29. Jaywalked a bit too ambitiously walking home from middle school. Luckily, it was a smaller car, so I rolled over the top and ended up in the grass median. The driver was going too fast for a residential area, but I was not injured, so I just continued home. When my mom asked what happened because I was dirty and shaken up, I lied and said I had been in a fight, which was stupid because I could have just said I fell down. The driver did not stop after hitting me, so there may be someone out there carrying the guilt of accidentally killing a school kid. Story 30. Zoning out and almost rear-ending the car in front of me going about 35 miles per hour. It was the hardest brake I have ever applied, and my car made some strange noises during and after. Story 31. I crawled into my family's pool when I was 18 months old. I was found floating face up. My dad came home from work and asked my grandmother where I was, but she had no idea. I had crawled out through a sliding glass door on the far side of the house, through two gate doors in the dog area, probably 20 feet wide, through the covered patio area and into the pool. That day, every door and gate was left open perfectly. My dad saw me through another sliding glass door to the patio area, so he ran outside and jumped into the pool. They found me floating face up, not crying or anything. The paramedic who showed up said the diaper had helped me float and saved me. I love the water as an adult. I live in the desert now, but I spend a lot of time on the Colorado River and visit California beaches more than 5 times a year. That feeling of floating with only my face out of the water is probably one of the most calming things for me now. Story 32. I reached a body mass index of 14 when I was anorexic. My heart rate was in the low 30s and I had osteoporosis. I became slightly ill, and my body was so weak from a minor virus that I fainted and hit my head. I thought I could die and I did not want to, so I forced myself to start eating. Story 33. I was trying to drain a crawl space that had flooded using a submersible pump. As I crawled to the corner to install the pump in the lowest spot, I realized I had dropped the extension cord and plug into the water while it was still plugged in. The outlet was not ground fault circuit interrupter protected. Fortunately, I did not get electrocuted. Story 34. Summer of 1984. Riding my bike with my head down at high speed, I unexpectedly struck the rear bumper of a parked car and flew over the car. The bike was wrecked, and my face was badly injured. A police officer on a motorcycle witnessed the whole incident and called an ambulance. Luckily, I did not strike my head or sustain a major neck injury. The outcome could have been much different, and my life could have ended right there at age 19. Story 35. I was going to the beach with my former boyfriend. He lived across the main road from it. I was being all cute and girly, jumping and twirling across the road when suddenly a car came around the bend and was a hair away from hitting me. Story 36. Bro, I once tried to juggle knives after watching a circus movie. Let's just say I stick to juggling my homework now. Story 37. I was doing a high ropes course, transitioning from one obstacle to another. In the transition, you have to unclip from one and reclip to the next. Before moving forward, you get the guide to check and make sure you did it correctly. He said I was good to jump. I did one more double check of my own and noticed I was not attached to either anymore and would have jumped 60 feet to the ground. Story 38. I once went outside to apply insect repellent right before a hike, and my dad stopped me before I sprayed it on. It was not off. It was Raid. I was about to douse myself in poison. Those cans should not look so similar. Story 39. Drank a single Four Loko, no other alcohol, then went to bed. Woke up covered in vomit and potentially could have choked on it. Story 40. Had a seizure at a friend's house late at night. I hit a coffee table headfirst, fractured my skull, and injured my brain. I was in a coma for nearly 2 weeks. I had 65 staples in my head with a piece of my skull removed. I have a plate in there now and, unfortunately, have a worse memory. I cannot smell or taste things properly anymore. I am just happy to be alive. My niece and nephew need their uncle. Story 41. I made a very valiant attempt to place a palm tree in my driver's seat, which I was occupying at the time. I couldn't quite fit it through the side window, so I thought if I approached it at about 70 miles per hour, I could pass it through the dashboard. The engine got in the way. Story 42. When I was in 3rd grade, I ran into traffic after my bouncy ball. Thank you to the PT Cruiser for being able to stop in time. You will stay forever in my mind. Story 43. Choking occurred twice on different occasions. Once around 2013, I was partying and my mouth was very dry. People were making hot dogs with proper baguette. I started choking because the bread was thick and my mouth was dry. Then, again, at a Christmas dinner a few years ago, a cracker got stuck in my throat. My father-in-law had to use the Heimlich maneuver. It happens so fast and can go unnoticed easily. It took people a while to react when I was at the party. Story 44. About 2 months ago, I was in the forest cutting a tree with a chainsaw. The chainsaw kicked back and came within 2 inches of injuring my face. Needless to say, I stopped cutting after that. Story 45. I hit my head working on my truck. I had the worst neck pain of my life for the next 3 weeks until one morning I woke up, couldn't see straight, and couldn't walk. It was terrifying. I called my boss and said I would be in late. He said, "Get some help." I fell back asleep and woke up a few hours later feeling all right. I started driving to work and called my mom to tell her what happened. I realized I was slurring my words. She rushed me to the hospital where they found I had a bilateral vertebral artery dissection. I spent 24 hours in the hospital and had an angiogram to inspect the damage. Then I was free to go. I was on blood thinners and baby aspirin for a year. At my follow-up, everything checked out and was fully healed. The scariest part was knowing that when I hit my head, there was about a 10% chance that I died right then and there. Story 46. I went to visit a friend for the first time. His housemate went through a doorway under the stairs a couple of times. In another friend's house, the layout was basically the same, and that was a downstairs toilet. Eventually, I needed the toilet. I opened the door, and it was pitch black. I couldn't find the light switch. I undid my jeans and turned around. Then, at the last second before sitting down, I thought I'd try the light switch again. I was right at the top of the stone cellar steps leading to the housemate's bedroom. I could have gone backwards, headfirst, down the lot. With a partially clothed dead woman in the house, my friend and his housemate probably would have ended up arrested. Story 47. I am sure that when I had a severe oxycodone addiction more than 15 years ago, there were times I probably came close to dying. Story 48. I kept telling myself it was a panic attack. It turned out to be blood clots in my lungs that almost caused cardiac arrest. Story 49. In 2013, I was very drunk and drove home. I stopped at Taco Bell and dropped my burrito while driving at 90 miles per hour around a curve. I flipped the car 5 times into a cornfield. Story 50. I used to drive a rapid response car for the London ambulance service. There were some drivers who were apparently unable to see the very bright yellow car right in front of them, with about 30 sets of blue lights flashing all over, or unable to hear the ear-splitting multidirectional sirens. I had to check all the buttons on the car in case I had accidentally activated some kind of stealth mode. There were many occasions when people did the craziest things, and I relied on my powerful brakes, hope, and possibly an improving deity to save my life. Story 51. 2 times stand out, though one was far closer than the other. The first time was when I was little. I was standing next to the pool and being a little troublemaker. I went to throw one of those inner tube things at my older brother and slipped, falling into the pool. At the time, I couldn't swim. My brother dove in and saved me. The second time is a lesson in being picky about quality with things related to weapons. I got home and rushed to the bathroom while still concealed carrying, using a floppy soft leather holster. I dropped my pants, and a few seconds later, my firearm fell out of that cheap, floppy holster onto its hammer with the barrel pointed straight at me. Thankfully, it was made well and dropped safe. If you are into firearms, get a holster that has retention and is made specifically for your firearm. It can literally be life or death if something on your firearm fails. Story 52. Being a teenage heroin addict for 5 years straight, I think back on all the times I overdosed in bathrooms and someone found me behind a locked door, or all the car accidents that should have killed me. All the dangerous situations I put myself in and the pain I caused my loved ones. I am now 31 years old with a family of my own, and I could not be more grateful to have survived that demonic life. Almost all of my friends I used with were not that lucky. Most died from their first overdose. I cannot even count on 2 hands how many overdoses I had. It shaped me as a person, and I like to think it is all part of my higher purpose. Life is a gift, and I am so happy to be alive. Story 53. I was also involved in the illegal acquisition of money that did not belong to me. The owner fired 2 shots. One of the bullets came through the rear windshield, broke, and the jacketed part of the bullet lodged in my arm, which was blocking my head. The heavier, more lethal part of the bullet whizzed past my head, probably centimeters away, and went through the front windshield. I was 18 and unknowingly pregnant. Story 54. I have never told this story before. Hopefully some people see it. We were active on the dark web around 2016 to 2017. We ordered from a vendor and he shorted us. We messaged him and he said he would make it right. The package arrived and it contained a powder that looked different. I opened it to see if I could identify it by smell. The vendor said it was a surprise. My friend grabbed my head and pulled me back, saying, "What are you doing?" I said I just wanted to see what it was. He told me to get away because I had no idea what it was. He messaged the vendor, who responded that he had sent about 12 grams of fentanyl. I had no idea what fentanyl was back then, but my friend saved my life without question. Story 55. Crashed a motorcycle at 145 miles per hour on the street. I had to be resuscitated 3 times over the following 48 hours. I never saw the tunnel or the light. Story 56. I was about 7 years old. I used to be a sleepwalker, and my mother recalled one time when I woke her up because I was pouring bleach into a cup. Luckily, she was there to stop me. Story 57. Reading some of these comments and seeing how close some of these people got makes me think about all of the people who did not get a chance to comment on this post because they accidentally took their own lives. Story 58. I once mixed up my water bottle with one I had used to soak paintbrushes. I took a big sip before realizing it tasted like chemicals. I spent the night on the phone with poison control. Story 59. Rollover accident with an all-terrain vehicle. If I had not been wearing a seatbelt, I would have fallen out, and it would have pinned me down and drowned me in a foot of water. Story 60. Mountain climbing in icy conditions in the Adirondacks with very poor gear. Slipping, sliding toward a cliff, and frantically grabbing a tree trunk is always a sign you need to rethink your choices. Story 61. I was playing with fireworks one 4th of July, and we saved up for one of those huge fireworks that looked like they were capable of excavating the moon. We saved it for last and set it off, but the fuse died halfway through the rocket. After fiddling with it for a minute, I stood up and walked away. After stepping away, it exploded and almost completely shattered the driveway we were standing on. From that day on, I let others set off fireworks. Honestly, I don't think they should sell fireworks commercially. Story 62. Mixed a lot of disinfecting bleach liquid soap together, trying to clean my bathroom. Then, the next thing I knew, I woke up in a hospital bed. Turns out I was inhaling toxic fumes from my mixture. Story 63. I pulled the trigger, but the bullet did not fire. I took the bullet out and it had a strike mark on it, but it still did not fire. Did I guess? I never tried it again. Ever. Story 64. I grew up on the Bay of Fundy, which has the highest tides in the world, in a house about 50 meters from the shore. I was a latchkey kid in the 1990s, so I spent a lot of time wandering alone in the woods and on the beach. One of my favorite things to do when I was around 7 to 10 years old was to wait for the tide to start going out. This would eventually create fast-flowing rivers on the beach that remained, and I would hop into them and let them carry me out to the ocean. Then I would swim back to shore and do it over and over until I got tired and went home. My hometown had fewer than 200 people, so there was absolutely no one around to help if anything went wrong. The only reason I stopped doing it was because I saw the movie Jaws and became too afraid to go back into the water. I am now 40 years old, and the idea of doing this makes me feel ill. Story 65. I put one bag with a half-gallon of milk and a couple of other items on one handlebar, and another bag of almost equal weight on my other handlebar. I got on my bike and started heading home, riding beside a busy road. The weight of the bags shifted back and forth with each pedal push. As I picked up speed, probably no more than 8 miles per hour, I started losing control of my steering. The bags had too much momentum as they swung. I forced my front wheel slightly left, but the bags swung far to the right. My bike went off the curb to the right. I fell into the side of the street, and my right leg came within less than 2 inches of being run over by a car, from my foot to my hip. Summary: Do not put heavy items on the handlebars of a bike and ride beside a busy road. Story 66. Ate a boneless chicken wing while home alone. My inner fat boy got excited and swallowed too early. Standing over the garbage, trying to cough up that chicken, was the most terrified I have ever been. Story 67. I fell from 2 stories and very luckily, albeit painfully, landed on a few bags filled with aluminum cans. I was 2 inches away from cracking my skull on a shelf made of cinder blocks. I walked away with a shattered foot, a large bruise on my buttocks, and disgust for my ex who told me to just use the fire escape ladder and put my weight on it to stabilize it. It did not stabilize but broke quickly. Story 68. I mindlessly closed the lid on the electrical panel of some equipment at work that had 220 volts running through it. I forgot I had plugged it back in. My finger brushed one of the screws inside as I closed the lid. When I tell you I felt the electricity go through my heart, I received a detailed 3-dimensional electrical map of my heart and every valve, imprinted onto my brain in that moment. I am very aware of exactly where my heart is now. It was wild. Story 69. Not going to the doctor for a few days when I had stomach pain. It turned out my appendix had burst, and I almost died of sepsis from trying to be a tough guy. Story 70. Randomly, I was on a fishing vessel around the Horn of Cape Breton. I decided to sit on the roof of the cabin and shoot some cool video. I didn't know there was a safe footpath to take. I remember waiting for the boat's roll with the waves to give me a little boost and then launched myself up there. I had a backpack full of camera equipment weighing me down, and nobody saw me do it. Looking back, I had to clear the roofline from the side of the boat on a bad knee. The moment I launched myself, the gravity of the situation dawned on me, and I had an oh no moment. Yet, I floated up multiple feet and sat perfectly on the roof like I was just placed there. The moment didn't feel real. I'm always like, yes, in a parallel reality, I'm at the bottom of the sea somewhere around Meat Cove. I've never told anyone. The pictures and videos are still on the memory card, and they are something I don't want to look at. Story 71. Walking into the woods to go deer hunting, I had a bad habit of keeping the safety off in case I saw a deer on my walk. The metal-on-metal noise of clicking the safety off can spook the deer, which is why I keep it off. When I got to my tree stand, shouldered my rifle, and began climbing, I did not notice ice on the ladder. I fell from about 15 feet and hit the ground, dropping my rifle. My rifle discharged upon hitting the ground and sent a very high-powered bullet sailing past me and into the trunk of a tree. My barrel was pointed about 2 feet to the left of where I landed. Had I fallen differently, that bullet would have killed me. It was the dumbest thing I had ever done, especially considering I spent time as a firearms instructor and consistently preached safety and muzzle discipline. This was years ago, and I made the decision to keep the safety on, especially when climbing my tree stand. I would rather lose out on a buck than receive a fist-sized wound in my body. Story 72. I laughed out loud. We received new box cutters at my job, and I was being careless while playing around. I almost severed my popliteal artery. Story 73. I was around 12 or 13 years old. I was playing at a beach in Cornwall with my cousin and my little sister. The beach was windy and rather large, so the Royal National Lifeboat Institution was only actively patrolling a certain stretch they had marked with flags. Many people were there, and since family members were some distance away getting ice cream, they did not see us slowly moving toward the other end of the beach, completely unsupervised. The tide was slowly coming in, and despite hearing warning horns and voices on megaphones, I did not realize that the patrol boat was desperately trying to signal us before we entered the choppy waters. Luckily, my dad noticed the boat acting erratically and saw the 3 dots 200 meters away that represented us playing. As he dropped into a dead sprint, all 3 of us were caught in a backwash, with torrents of water threatening to pull us into the gray waves. I was on my hands and knees digging in, unaware of the danger we were in. I looked over my shoulder as the force of the water subsided and saw my dad scooping up my sister almost without slowing down. He quickly turned and grabbed both mine and my cousin's arms before marching us back inland. He said nothing, but moved faster than I had ever seen him move, with the most pale and terrified expression. Both parents received stern warnings from authorities about how much danger their children were in. Took me a while to realize how close we came to simply wading into the water and never being seen again. Story 74. One time I microwaved a metal travel mug for 2 minutes because I wanted my coffee hot and fast. I stood there watching it like I was defusing a bomb with zero training. I survived, but the microwave did not. Rest in peace, General Electric, 2007 to 2021. Story 75. Falling asleep while driving and rolled a Volkswagen Jetta at 80 miles per hour. I only had a headache from hitting my head on the windows. Story 76. Driving in the snow. In college, I would drive home 40 minutes to go to my job once a week in the middle of the week. Usually, I would drive back home right after work ended at around midnight, except a snowstorm hit. I decided to wait it out and stay at my parents' house for the night. The next morning, I left and tried to make it to my first class of the day at about 11 a.m. Roads were bad, though, and I should have stayed home. I made it about halfway to school when I hit a slippery patch, went off the road into a guardrail, and bounced off into the direction of an oncoming tractor-trailer. My only saving grace was that the roads were so bad that the tractor-trailer was only doing about 20 miles per hour, so they were able to safely go around me. While waiting for the tow truck, I received notification that class was canceled. Screw you, human geography. Story 77. My girlfriend was out of town, and I was watching her dog at her apartment. I went to the local pizza place and got a stromboli. About 2 bites in, I started to choke on a large piece of mozzarella. I began to black out a bit from not being able to breathe and panicking. Somehow, I had the presence of mind to stick my fingers down my throat and dislodge it. After taking about a 5-minute break, I resumed eating. I really loved that pizza place. Story 78. Jumped off a dock into a glacier lake with a broken collarbone. Hit the ice-cold water, body tensed up, bone moved, and I started sinking. Something snapped in my head, the pain went away, and I was able to swim to the bank. Story 79. As a sophomore in high school, I snuck out of the house in the middle of the night during the dead of winter, wearing a t-shirt, sandals, jeans, and no jacket. Nobody knew where I was. By the time I started walking home, I was so cold that I couldn't feel my legs below the knees. It was a bizarre feeling, like walking on 2 stumps of dead meat. I remember walking through a grassy field and having to pick up my own legs with my hands and place them back down on the ground to take a step. The ground was uneven, and I was worried that if I put my foot down at a weird angle, I wouldn't be able to feel it and might twist my ankle. By the time I got home, I was so tired I immediately got in bed and went to sleep. It took me years to realize that what I had experienced was hypothermia, and that going to sleep was probably the most dangerous thing I could have done at the time. I honestly believe that if I hadn't been so careful walking and had slipped and fallen in that field, I wouldn't have ever made it home. Story 80. Fortunately, I never came that close, but I did fall through the ice of a frozen lake once and started getting hypothermic. That definitely could have gone really bad. Also, a couple of years ago, I got into a bad car accident. I was T-boned by a sport utility vehicle going probably close to 50 in a 35 zone. The car was totaled, but I walked away from it essentially fine. Again, it definitely could have gone a lot worse. Story 81. Honest accident, not an attempt. 2 times. Once in the summer of 8th grade, I fell out of a tree from 45 feet in the air. The second time was driving home to see my wife and new baby. A driver cut me off at 75 miles per hour, clipped my front fender, and sent me into a cement divider on the highway, which then pushed me into the back of a moving armored truck at about 60 to 70 miles per hour. Of course, the car was totaled. Story 82. I stabbed myself in the bicep by accident with a cake decorating tool, a fondant needle. It caused a small puncture wound. About a week later, my entire arm was swollen, would not bend, and my skin looked wrinkly. I ended up in the hospital with sepsis and received a 4-day antibiotic drip. It is strange to think that without modern medicine, I could have died from a small puncture wound at 25. I also clotheslined a barbed wire fence while driving an all-terrain vehicle. Story 83. Overdosing on fentanyl, I was very drunk and made a poor decision. Apparently, I wasn't breathing for about 5 minutes and was turning blue. If it hadn't been for a random stranger who administered naloxone 3 times, including a shot to the thigh, I would be dead. I have been sober for years now. It was a frightening experience, and I am lucky to still be alive and very thankful that a stranger happened to be nearby in the middle of the night with naloxone. Story 84. When I was hunting, I fell asleep, leaned forward, and rested my forehead on my hands. My hands were on the muzzle of a loaded 12-gauge slug. I stopped hunting if I was even remotely tired. Story 85. Driving home late one night, really tired, I drove through an ungated railroad crossing. I missed the red lights and looked to the right to see a train about 20 feet away. I had passed it before I even realized I was about half a second from being killed. It really woke me up. Story 86. I emptied the shells from my gun, put it to my head, and pulled the trigger to decide if I wanted to stay here or not. That was the point years ago when I began seeking help and ultimately overcame my depression. Story 87. In high school, I went on a class trip to New York City. One of the students brought some cannabis. We were staying at the Edison Hotel near Times Square. I got very high, climbed out of the window on my belly, and had one of the other students hold my legs while I dangled about 200 feet above 47th Street. Story 88. When I was in junior high, my mom worked as a cook at my school. She would go to work very early, and my sister and I would ride with her. One day, I got ready quickly and decided to get in the car and go back to sleep. I woke up to my mom and dad panicking because I had left the car running in the closed garage. I never knew that was dangerous until that moment. Story 89. I technically died, drowning at Daytona Beach when I ignored the warning not to get in the water and the tide pulled me out to sea. The worst part was getting resuscitated because my lungs felt like they were on fire, and breathing made it worse. I had to go to the hospital so they could check for brain damage since I was unconscious for about 5 minutes. Since it will probably be asked, I did not see the other side or anything like that, and if I did, I do not remember it. From my perspective, I blacked out and immediately woke up back on the beach as if no time had passed. Thinking back on it kind of gives me whiplash, to be honest. Story 90. I fell asleep while driving and woke up when my body jerked. I opened my eyes to see a wall on a curve on the freeway, going about 60 miles per hour. My instincts made me grab the wheel and yank it. Thankfully, nothing happened, but I still get scared thinking about it to this day. Story 91. My friend taught me how to hold my breath when I was in elementary school. I showed it to my mom when she was picking me up from a sleepover. I fainted and hit my head on the sharp part of a brick wall in front of their house. I got a concussion and cracked my skull. 15 years later, I can still feel the spot if I lie a certain way. Story 92. First time at the shooting range with some friends. The pistol jammed, and I couldn't figure out why. I looked straight down the barrel of the gun with my finger on the trigger like a cartoon character. Still haunts me. Story 93. I am pretty sure I have had a heart attack. I experienced all the classic symptoms: sweating, increased heart rate, clamminess, vomiting, and left side pain. I never followed up on it. Story 94. Last year, while driving to work, a truck about 50 yards in front of me hit a metal pole in the road. The pole flew into the air. As it was descending directly toward me, I swerved out of my lane and saw it was by my driver's side mirror. It would have impaled me in either the head or chest. Story 95. Riding my motorcycle drunk, I fishtailed into a construction zone at about 50 miles per hour and miraculously did not fall off the bike. I am thankful every day that alcohol is no longer in my life. Story 96. When I was around 12, I was climbing a tree in my garden at around 7 p.m. I do not know why. Predictably, I fell out, but my coat got caught, and I was hanging, slowly being suffocated. Story 97. Either a car accident, burning an old desk that had bullets in a drawer, or walking across an abandoned rail bridge that had completely rotted away and was really just a mat of thick vines with no actual ties left. Story 98. Went for a quick test ride on my brand new mountain bike I had just gotten that day. I did not wear a helmet or padding because I was just going for a quick ride. I slipped in a corner, hit my bare head on hard-packed dirt with rocks, brushed myself off, and kept riding. I nearly passed out at my kitchen counter minutes after I got home. A computerized axial tomography scan confirmed a concussion. One well-placed rock likely would have changed my life. Story 99. Choked on steak. I legitimately couldn't breathe, so I knew I was in big trouble with a full blockage. I was standing there thinking to myself, stay calm. You have to be calm. You don't have long. All the scenarios of being home with an 8-year-old who can't help. Could I make it to the neighbor? What if he can't come home? It all culminated in me thinking I could give myself a decent chest thrust over a wooden high-back chair at the right angle. And if I broke some ribs, at least I wouldn't be dead, traumatizing my child. I managed to hit it hard enough to dislodge it and was fine aside from some bruising from the chair. Thankfully. But I'll never eat steak alone now, only when my partner is home, because that was probably the most terrifying experience of my life. And then I taught my son last year how to do a chest thrust on someone bigger than you, just in case. Story 100. When I was very young, I was home alone and almost choked on one of those Werther's original caramel hard candies. I have never liked hard candy since. Story 101. Accidentally left a candle burning after having a romantic bubble bath with my spouse at the time. We went to sleep and I was awoken by heavy black smoke. I immediately started crying because I couldn't breathe and my eyes burned when I tried to open them. My girlfriend at the time pushed me out the window and saved my life. She says she woke up first, but I remember waking her up and panicking because of our dogs in the next room. Unfortunately, we couldn't save them. Not only did I almost kill myself, but I almost killed my girlfriend and did lose my 2 dogs and a cat we had at the time. It happened in 2015, one of the worst moments of my life. The guilt I lived and still live with hurts so badly I can't breathe sometimes. I have never lit a tea candle since that night. Story 102, 2011. Rolled a Toyota 4Runner down a 50-foot embankment. 2012. Heroin overdose. 2020. Necrotizing pancreatitis and went septic. I am sober now. Story 103. When I was a little kid, I decided to see how many somersaults I could do underwater. When I could not hold my breath any longer, I felt dizzy and disoriented and could not figure out how to swim to the surface. Thankfully, after a few seconds of thrashing, I realized if I just held still, I would float up. Story 104. So many times I feel like I upset some cosmic entity, and then I also feel like I have a relative or someone looking after me. When I was really little, maybe 7, we were at a friend's farm milking a cow, I think, and the bull broke through. It ran at me. One of my dad's friends picked me up and launched me over the fence. I was very clumsy like a little kid. I don't really remember it. In the moment, I was unaware because I was little. But my dad was pale-faced, and when he tells the story, he mentions how lucky we were that his friend was there. I had a bus crash happen, and when I go down that road, I cringe every time. I was taking transit, and a car came flying into the side of the bus where I was sitting, then kept going and crashed into something else. It was a wild experience. I was walking my dog once, and someone ran a red light on a turn with a pedestrian walkway. I thought we were going to die. In panic, I kicked the car's front with my foot as if it would stop it. We were also horse riding on a trail once, and I guess it was more deteriorated than the trail guide thought after a storm. My horse literally stepped on a part that gave way beneath us. It was the scariest moment ever. I didn't look down for the rest of the ride and held my breath any time the horse tripped. There was once when a doctor gave me the wrong medication that I am severely allergic to, and I woke up feeling sick. My mom screamed because my face was swollen badly, lips and eyes. She rushed me to the hospital as my throat was closing. That was the worst Christmas of my life. I got very sick and didn't know I had postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome at the time. My heart rate went up to 180, and I was rushed to the hospital. I totally thought I was having a heart attack. Those were difficult times. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.